Good evening, everyone. My name is Zach Kais, and I'm the art director of the Architectural Association. And it gives me great pleasure tonight to welcome, on behalf of the AA, all of our guests tonight. Before we start, could I just remind everyone to switch off their mobile phones? That includes me. Yeah, great. So as some of you know, in 2007, the AA staged an exhibition, Forms of Inquiry, the Architecture of Critical Graphic Design. And what started out as an exhibition expanded into a kind of 2-year-long journey, which was part book, part exhibition, part workshop, and part seminar. This exhibition toured, and it also went to IASPIS, which led to the IASPIS Forum on Design and Critical Practice, which has comprised an exhibition, an international seminar, and now this book, which, even though I'm kind of obliged to say this, I truly think it's an incredible undertaking and a very important book. In a sense, tonight, it's a very special occasion because we're also welcoming back many of our contributors to both Forms of Inquiry, IASPIS, Forum on Design and Critical Practice, both through the members on the panel and the people, some of the designers, contributors are in the audience tonight. The format of tonight's talk is kind of camouflaged as a book launch, but it's actually something a little bit different. We will have 4 short 15-minute presentations, followed by a discussion amongst the participants and also the audience. So I encourage everyone, if you have questions along the way, to please make note of them, and we'll have a kind of collective discussion afterwards. A certain quantity of books are available for sale after the talk, and you can join us here or in the bar upstairs afterwards. It's a pleasure to introduce this evening's speakers. We have from IASPIS, Magnus Eriksson and Sarah Telemann here. Magnus is the project manager, Sarah is the project coordinator. We have in the audience Cecilia Wiedenheim, who is the IASPIS director, hiding behind the pillar here. We also have Martin Frostner, who is joining IASPIS, and he worked on the design of the book together with Jonas Williamson, who is a Swedish graphic designer, graduated with an MA from Konstfack University in 2002, and set up his own design studio based in Stockholm. Sarah de Bont is a London-based graphic designer, Belgian graphic designer, who runs her own studio and teaches at the Royal College of Art. She co-curated the Forum of the Book conference at St. Bride Library in January 2009. And Barterama, which was a printed matter swap fair at the Barbican Conservatory in July this year. We also have a few members of Europa here, Mia Frostner, Robert Solis, and Paul Tisdale, which is a graphic design collective that was formed in 2007 after graduating from the RCA. So I'll turn it over now to Magnus to speak a bit about the kind of structure and topic of our conversation today.
Thank you. Thanks, Zach. I just want to say, first of all, that it's great to be here at the Architectural Association, and I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to do this event where this actually all started, in a way, where we started to discuss this project, and of course where the Forms of Inquiry was produced and first shown. I, of course, also like to say thank you to everyone at the Architectural Association that's been helping out here. We've been thinking of this event as a possibility to do something a little bit more than a book release, and to have the opportunity to speak about practice that navigates on the borders of contemporary graphic design and the roles of platforms, or as maybe we said before this big spaces that facilitate this. Spaces created by designers themselves in maybe self-initiated projects, in negotiating for space within commissions, or by institutions like IASPIS, for example, the AA, facilitating other kind of possibilities. And as Zach already said, we brought together some designers represented in the exhibition and a few represented in the books to kind of give us examples of this. And at the end, we're going to discuss around a few questions around the importance and of these kind of platforms. So basically, I'll ask Zach to start with your part first. Yeah?
Yep. So, I think one such space is forms of inquiry, and that's perhaps an interesting point to start to kind of provide some context to what this project has been and is. I don't know exactly where to start, but over 2 years ago, we began on a project called Forms of Inquiry, and we're now actually exactly back where we started. We're actually kind of across the hallway. This is the facade of the building in October of 2007. At the Architectural Association, this is a project by Cornell Windland. And the connections between architecture and graphic space led me to curate this exhibition and also co-edit the accompanying catalog with Mark Owens. The title, Forms of Inquiry, is meant to suggest that the critically engaged practices of graphic design are multiple and meant to serve not as a kind of summary statement, but as a kind of provocation for further debate and exchange. Forms of Inquiry presents a group of contemporary international graphic designers, as did the IASPIS seminar, who based their work in what we called critical investigation. This project took the form of both an exhibition and a book. This is the first invitation to the exhibition as well as the catalog. In the show, each participant was invited to contribute inquiries into architectural subjects as the foundation for a series of newly commissioned prints. The inquiries took the form of, they were extremely varied. They took the form of a kind of influential reference or a personal connection to architecture, or the porous relationship between graphic and architectural space. Together with the editor, Mark Owens, and we invited several practitioners in the field of graphic design and put together this small book which presents a really diverse array of possible methodologies, and I hope that's something that we will talk about more in our conversation later. The exhibition expanded over the course of 2 years with additional contributions of inquiries and prints. It led to several different forms of publications. This is one such that was produced at the completion of the exhibition in Lausanne. And these publications gathered together a group of designers who were kind of united by a shared desire to reframe certain practices around contemporary graphic design. When we framed the exhibition, we used the term inquiry, not only in the title, but also to refer to the kind of the contribution, the discursive contribution that the designers made. And it was a very important word for us because we were distinguishing from the kind of ubiquitous incentive to conduct research. And this distinction was very important for us because unlike empirical research, the term inquiry suggests something which is almost more kind of anti-methodological and kind of poses questions without necessarily knowing where they will lead. This is just across the hall where another exhibition, First Works, is located now. And the idea of the exhibition really was to use these critical methodologies, these critical inquiries, as a way to generate one's own kind of knowledge and content. And in doing so, it kind of ran contrary to the kind of service-based nature of conventional graphic design and architectural practices. This is the reading room that was part of Forms of Inquiry, in which we invited a guest-curated group of designers and publishers to select various publications that were kind of background research or reading. The exhibition touches upon the intersections of graphic design and specifically architecture by proposing models in which graphic design can engage collaboratively with architecture, but also borrow from its expanded methodological and critical toolbox. The response to forms of inquiry brought it to 6 institutions across Europe. This is the exhibition pictured at Casco Office for Art, Design and Theory in Utrecht. At the time, Emily Pethick was the director, who has also contributed to the reader. This is at Lux in Valence, France, where the exhibition expanded as it traveled, and it continually emphasized local research and sites for exchange. This was a very important aspect of it. And in doing so, it encompassed a number of spaces for discussion, including an exhibition, a reading room, public programs consisting of lectures, performances, and a concert, actually, in Lausanne. From Valence, forms of inquiry went to IASPIS in Stockholm, which was the occasion of the IASPIS Forum on Design and Critical Practice, which was a seminar that Magnus will speak about more that resulted in this publication. And this is just an installation shot at IASPIS to kind of give you some kind of context of what the exhibition looked like. And this is where the exhibition concluded in Lausanne. This is at Archezoom. It was a 2-part exhibition at Archezoom and the corridor at Botelang. And it was especially presented and designed by a Zurich-based designers, Plain Caputo, who designed this very interesting kind of framework, which they almost look like pages of a book that kind of unfold. And it's a kind of interesting take on a white cube where you have these kind of timber structures which contain the previous projects and the inquiries. And inside were the prints that were developed from those inquiries. It also included a concert by Laurent Benner and AMPM and Larita, and also a series of lectures. From there, or simultaneously, the show was shown at the corridor in Botelang, and this was a kind of strange Naumanesque space of this very narrow corridor. And within all of these various iterations of the exhibition, the works were gathered under 3 general headings: typographics, modes of production, and also methodologies. So I thought an interesting way to kind of show how the exhibition actually worked would just to look at, let's say, a case study. So across these 3 broad groupings, we set kind of rules for a game or a brief as we graphic designers might think of it, in which we invited 3 contributions from each designer. Part A was a curated work representative of that designer's practice. Part B was a written inquiry into an architectural subject. And this inquiry then served as the foundation for a series of newly commissioned prints. And to show one example, James Goggin can't be here tonight, but he stopped by earlier, and I thought this would be an interesting example to show. This is the curated work, or the kind of representative work of James Goggin that was included in the exhibition. It's a response from a commission by Tate to design a new identity for an untitled, it was called Untitled the Space. It was a gallery. And instead of providing an identity or a titled logo, he kind of created this flip-dot display which can cycle through different patterns and text. James's inquiry was about the use of color as a void and color also as a form of architecture. And he selected as his inquiry this image, which was sparked by a kind of unsolicited proposal for Ground Zero by the American artist Ellsworth Kelly. And Ellsworth Kelly cut out this photograph of Ground Zero from the New York Times and kind of superimposed this, or the former site of the World Trade Center, and kind of superimpose this green shape to propose that perhaps built structures aren't absolutely necessary, but that it could be a kind of space for reflection. This led to a commissioned print, which it folds down into a booklet as well, which brings together an expanded set of references that suggest kind of new possibilities for color and architecture, and also kind of color as a void. So many different references from Yves Klein to the Ellsworth Kelly image. We could, it's a huge project that generated a lot of material over the course of 2 years. We could really talk about each kind of inquiry and print, but I'll spare you that, and just give you a kind of quick visual impression of the 32 prints that were eventually created. This is by Abake. This is De Valence. Manuel Rader, a kind of folded sheet. Dexter Sinister. Experimental Jet Set. Hudson Powell, and I think there may be in the audience somewhere. John Morgan. Julia Bourne, which was actually a score for a performative dance piece. Karl Martins and David Benioff. Kasia Korczak. Mette Haven. Mavis and van Derzen. Paul Elleman. Projects. Radim Pesco. Sarah DeBont. Will Holder. Michael Worthington. And then as the show traveled, it expanded in some of the posters I showed, followed at different venues. This collection is from Archizoom. This is Francesca Grassi. Hoon Kim. Jonathan Hares. Laurens Brunner. Urs Lenny and Lex Trube. This is by Liam Gillick. Liam Gillick. Norm. Ryan Gander. And a few of these that I'm showing now are brought together in this smaller publication, Forms of Inquiry Annex. David Keshavi and Julian Tavelli. Zhao Mag and Chen Zi. And Jonas William and Martin Frostner. I wasn't really sure how to conclude this kind of short fragment of the exhibition, but I thought I would end with actually something else that Jonas and Martin made for Stockholm before handing it over to Magnus, which was this poster. Think before you print. Thank you. Magnus?
Thanks, Zach. I'm actually going to speak a little bit about IASPIS to give you some kind of background on that, and also because, of course, this is where we come from, but it's also a platform or space, as you wish. Okay, thanks. So I'll give you a little bit of a background what IASPIS is, and then what we do, and trying to be as brief as possible. IASPIS is the Swedish Arts Grants Committee's international program for visual artists, and the Swedish Arts Grants Committee is a governmental agency whose aim is to, in different ways, support practitioners from various fields of art, including visual arts, dance, music, theatre, and film, and this mainly by by handing out different kind of grants. And within the Swedish Arts Grants Committee, IASPIS is the international program for visual artists, designers, crafts practitioners, and architects. And I've been displaying the aim of it, and I'm just reading this kind of official version. IASPIS is, you can read, is to support international exchange for practitioners in the area of visual art, design, craft, and architecture. IASPIS activities aims to enable professionals to develop artistically and improve their working conditions by establishing international contacts between practitioners and institutions, individual professionals such as curators and critics and others in the field. And right, IASPIS operates mainly through activities in 4 areas, or we can at least explain it like that. It's a studio or residency program for Swedish and international practitioners. International practitioners can only come by invitation, and Swedish can apply. We operate both in Sweden and internationally through collaborations with other similar institutions or organizations. It's grants. IASPIS distributes grants for international exchange 4 times a year, and this for individual practitioners to create their own kind of exchange situations outside IASPIS as an institution. A public program, which is of course another kind of important part of what we're doing, with seminars, lectures and exhibitions as forms of inquiry, for example, mainly in Sweden, but also as now, even though this is a small thing, internationally. And the IASPIS has, I forgot, of course, produced over the years quite many publications in relation to the public program. And then networking is, of course, an important part of our work, and we're trying to kind of do this in many different ways. The original assignment of the IASPIS included both visual arts, crafts and architecture and design, even though the main focus has since the start been on visual arts, since the start in 1996. But since then, the IASPIS has started to develop a program with a more particular focus on craft, design and architecture. And about 2 years ago, I was commissioned to, as a project manager, to lead this development in dialogue with the direction of the IASPIS as an integrated part of the IASPIS. And since then, myself and mainly Sarah Telemann has been developing a variety of different activities, and of course including this project. And I can come back to this maybe in the panel, how we kind of set up things and the thoughts behind this in relation to specifically design. So I'll try to come to the point here and to tell you a little bit about what was called the IASPIS Forum on Design and Critical Practice. As a part of the public program, this project started actually as an idea of bringing an exhibition, in this case then forms of inquiry, to IASPIS. And the initiative came from 2 graphic designers based in Stockholm, Martin, who's here, and Jonas Williamson, who actually contacted me and wanted to discuss the possibilities of bringing something like this to Stockholm. And we can speak about this more, but I think we were, instantly agreed on that this exhibition was really kind of needed on the Swedish scene as a starting point for a discussion and of course for inspiration in a way for practitioners and for others to kind of bring up this kind of aspects of design that we were kind of missing. For IASPIS, it was an opportunity also to show an exhibition that we hardly could have produced ourselves, and to create a context for an international exchange in this. And to adjust to the context of IASPIS and very much in line of Zach's ideas of constantly changing the exhibition depending on where it was shown, we very early on discussed how we could add something to the exhibition. Add something that would be in line with what we're supposed to do at the IASPIS, and of course to the kind of the Swedish scene. I'll show you, I forgot to show you some more images here. These are just something happening at IASPIS. IASPIS. Let's just. So I was just flicking through some images of things being done at the IASPIS over these 2 years, and kind of ending here at, not really, at the Forms of Inquiry exhibition, some images of that. These are images from later projects. But to make a rather long story short, we decided to create an international seminar with invited designers and others represented in Forms of Inquiry, but also from the Swedish scene. And with the aim of creating a set of dialogues complemented with other voices, describing different aspects of design practice relating to what we call investigative, speculative, or critically oriented design, we decided to connect this to publication. And to be really honest, I'm not sure anymore what came first, because we were kind of developing the idea of this seminar and the book at the same time. The seminar that was held at the same time, here we go, it just goes on. Can we stop it?
Anyway, go to exit.
No. Seems to have stopped, yeah.
No.
Yeah, here we go. Let's stop there. So the seminar that was held in conjunction with the exhibition was an initial attempt to take matters a step further and help to create a forum for encounter and for discussion. And it brought together some of the designers from Forms of Inquiry, curators, critics, practitioners from other fields of art, design, architecture, based in Stockholm mainly. And we did a series over a long day in Stockholm, a series of lectures and discussions. Then the publication that came, well, the seminar was basically a year ago. And now the publication can be seen as kind of an extended version of this seminar, whatever started first, making it possibly a deeper discussion possible. And the book is based on 4 conversations between designers, and then we've added more different kind of text, interviews and transcripts, etc., to kind of add up to this. And in total, this involved a rather long list of people. And for the seminar, we invited Julia Born, who I think was kind of seen somewhere there. Armand Mevis, James Coggin, Europa, SAC, Ramya Marseille from Stockholm, Nille Svensson from Sweden Graphics, and Sara Kristoffersson, and Emily King was the moderator. And actually an early thing, we also did a seminar lecture with Daniel van der Velden from Metahaven that's kind of running out. And the book finally featured Kajsa Ståhl and Maki Suzuki from Mårbäcke, with Jose Eriksson, James Coggin and Europa, Will Holder and Samuel Nyholm, Nille Svensson and Experimental Jet Sets, an interview with Metahaven with David Reinfeldt and Stuart Bailey, that's a sinister, with Emily Pethick, Sack and Mark Owens, Nick Carey and Ramya Marseille. I'm sorry about these images, but there might be a couple more of them from the seminar in Stockholm. James, Julia, and some images from the exhibition as well. Yeah, about that. So, this extension of the initial idea of bringing forms of inquiry was at least an attempt to create a platform or a forum to promote an international exchange, but also to create a discussion and possibly a discursive space. And I think we kind of also created a starting point for a growing network, including now Sweden. And we wanted to create this kind of space for reflection and discussion, and possibly also to kind of inspire others to create similar spaces. And at least we've started. And I think I'll basically end here, and then we can speak more about the forms of the book and as a platform, and but also about IASPIS as a platform.
Okay.
Back again.
All right. So I think next we have Sarah. I just need to.
Shall I swap with you? Or?
Yeah, do you want to? Maybe you can swap with
Yeah.
Magnus.
Hello, my name is Sarah, and I made a poster for Zach for one of the forms of inquiry. I wasn't in the first one, and yeah. So I'm a designer based in London, and Zach asked me to talk about a project which I recently did with my partner Anthony Hudek under the name of Occasional Papers for the Barbican Art Gallery, and that was called Bartarama. But I thought maybe instead of only talking about Bartarama, I talk a little bit also about why it came about and what happened before, which is kind of, I did a pitch for the Barbican Art Gallery to do an identity for an exhibition design for an exhibition called Radical Nature that was at the Barbican in the summer. And it was an exhibition of artists using nature in a radical way, or thinking about the environment and using that in their work. And for the pitch, we decided to really kind of go down the path of researching the ecology of and how you can use more environmental friendly graphic design, or how you can try to make less of an impact on the environment by the tools you use as a graphic designer. Something I've always been interested in but never really had the time to research. And I always try seeing as pitches or as bigger projects as like an excuse for finding stuff out that I want to learn about. So maybe that's already a first point that I wanted to make, that very often I don't see it as such a separate thing. And it's not like independent projects and then you have the clients. And I think you mentioned, Zach, that I think I even wrote it down, about the conventional service-based practice of graphic design. But I think that doesn't really exist. It's always been kind of an interaction between the two, and that's very much how I see it. And so really it came from the Barbican. And so some things I'm going to tell you now are maybe more about the process of doing the exhibition design, but from that thinking came then the idea for Bartarama. Yeah, these are just two envelopes that arrived to my studio one day, and that really kind of summed it all up, how graphic designers today are still producing this kind of crap, totally wasteful plastic envelopes that you can't recycle. And we have so much power to not to do that and not to contribute to that. And if you just think a little bit about that, like, is that really necessary? Do we really need to print a 50-page catalog instead of a leaflet? Then I think you can do a lot of things. For example, this telescope packaging that's got full color fake cardboard printed on it to make it look ecological. So these are some things that we found out that I thought could be nice to share with you. For example, there's this widget that you can download on your computer. It's an Apple widget that tells you all about sustainable graphic design. You can download it for free, and it sort of gives you tips about, for example, coated paper is much more difficult to recycle than uncoated paper. This kind of things. If you go to the Apple website, you can download it. Also, there are a series of inks that are much more polluting than other inks. So, yeah, some Pantone colors contain more metallics than others. So, if you just kind of read up about that. We also found this font that's a free downloadable font. I don't think it's very nice, but it kind of inspired our design. And it's instead of being full, it's got holes in the middle, which means it uses less ink. So they encourage. So it's downloadable for free, so people can use it at home on their inkjet printers and kind of keep their ink cartridges for longer. And so as our pitch presentation, we basically presented this document, which was mostly just research about how to make less impact on the environment in your graphic design or even daily life. And you can download the PDF. It's things that we found on other websites. It's nothing that we wrote ourselves, but it could be maybe kind of interesting to just have a quick look. And then, so from that, we made kind of a sort of manifesto for the exhibition design, and the catalog and the gallery guide. In how we're going to try and be as environmentally friendly as possible. And some things turned out to be really difficult to do. For example, printing abroad, but we were not able to do that in the end. We did print the catalog abroad. And also I kind of realized afterwards that printing isn't necessarily worse for the environment than digital, because digital uses a lot of energy as well. So yeah, just by doing it as well, we learn a lot of things. And these are some early experiments. We did a lot of kind of printing with beetroot juice and coffee, and in the pitch we handed this out and people were like sniffing it and smelling it. Or also, apparently if you emboss something, you don't use ink, so it's less materials, it's less impact on the environment as well. So we did some tests with that. Also, like we thought it would be fun to maybe grow some typography if in the hallway on the TV screens they could have had this like I don't know live typeface or something. So these are all some tests that we did. I have to say I did this together with Chris Benson, who is in the audience tonight, who works with me. That's another idea we had, that was to power the whole exhibition with bikes. So if you were watching a movie, that you'd have to cycle to get the energy, but that didn't go through. And then that was kind of the main idea, the previous exhibition was Le Corbusier, and we suggested to recycle that exhibition in the design of the new exhibition. So we chopped up all the walls and reused them for the exhibition furniture. And we found this beautiful book that's, I think, is the exhibition still on next door?
It just ended.
Yes, by Enzo Mari, where it kind of explains how to, I mean, I'm sure you all know about it, it was an exhibition about it next door. He kind of explains how to make your own furniture using his diagrams, and we used his drawings to make the exhibition design from the old Le Corbusier walls. And also, Gerrit Rietveld, great furniture. And the title wall as well was just bits of old exhibition walls stuck together and just routed in and laser cut, so no ink, no extra materials, just removing materials. And it's all nailed in, so you can just take it out and reuse everything. There's no glue. And there was something also quite nice about showing things that are used or that are dirty. We're always so obsessed with making it new or bigger or brighter, but there's actually quite a lot of value in reusing things, and if you use it in a creative way, I think that can be quite exciting. Yeah. And then for the poster, for the sort of the titles and the text explaining about the artist, we decided not to use any vinyl lettering because that's plastic and you can't recycle that either. So instead we asked the Barbican for old posters and just printed on the back of them. So we just turned them around and just nailed them into the wall. So again, they could just be removed and recycled. And then the catalog was printed completely on recycled paper, and we tried to cover as little from the catalog as possible, so no full bleed images, so as small as possible images, and no foil blocking, and yeah. And then the final thing which we managed to do was convince the Barbican. They wanted to print 30,000 gallery guides, and that was going to cost £2,500. And we said to them, do you really need 30,000 gallery guides? Do you know how many visitors are going to come to your gallery? And they didn't. So we managed to convince them to buy us this machine, and we got to keep it. And and it's a, I'm sure everybody knows about it these days. It's a Riso, it's a stencil duplicator. It prints with soya ink, so it's very, very ecological. And instead we printed as they needed them, and then brought them over to the Barbican, so in small batches. So, and we only printed 15,000 gallery guides. So that's kind of the intro to say then, and then the Barbican then told me, okay, we're having this do something different weekend, and we thought it'd be really cool if you could do like a print workshop, you know, about how you're printing with vegetable inks, and that could be so fun if all the kids could come to the gallery and do some of that. And I actually kind of told them I didn't really want to do that, because in a way it's doing the opposite of what we were trying to do. You're making people you're making them feel better about themselves, thinking they're doing something ecological, but in a way they're just producing more crap and just adding to the pile of stuff just for some fun on a Sunday afternoon, and you're not really kind of encouraging them to think about what they do or how they can change what they do. And so my partner Anthony came up with the idea of Barterama, which is kind of a swap fair for printed matter. So the idea was not to have any money, but people to just bring old books or old printed matter. That could have also been posters or leaflets or T-shirts or mugs or whatever, and to just swap it, so by bartering. And the Barbican said, oh yeah, we love the idea, it's great, but in fact the education department are already going to do it, so yeah, could you think of something else? And then in the end, we kind of put our foot down and convinced them that if we just do it about printed matter, it's a different thing from the education department, who were doing it more about everything, bringing clothes or chairs or whatever. But what's also fun is that they also asked me to be on this panel, this kind of eco-design panel. And we were really having discussions with Anthony and I. When the Barbican were saying no to Barterama, I was telling him, yeah, actually, you know, that's not serious anyway. I'm going to do this panel that's going to be super serious. Everybody's going to be talking about ecological graphic design. That's what matters. That's what my practice is about. And in the end, we gave everything we got to Barterama, and it became such a big thing. And when I did the panel discussion, it was with 3 other people that I'd never met before. And like there were maybe 10 people in the audience. And so it's kind of, in a funny way, Barterama has much more of an influence on what I do or on my practice, even though it started a bit as a kind of a hobby or an outsider project. So yeah, that was to explain a little bit to people. And from the beginning, what was very important was that we got a lot of people involved that weren't necessarily part of our group of friends, and also the idea that everything that we were left with at the end of the day was donated to Oxfam. So we went around to loads of people, including the AA bookshop, to to ask for donations, because we thought also maybe people won't arrive with printed matter, so we need kind of a bank where if you come you get maybe one copy of something and then you can start to trade. So we invited both independent publishers or people making magazines or whatever, as well as libraries and bookshops to donate their old materials. We also had lots of volunteers helping out during the day. And this is, for example, Anna Gerber from Visual Editions, a new publisher, and Luke Williams from Plum. They had a stall. And that's Anthony's mom, who was our hostess of the day. This was kind of a bit of an inspiration for us. It's Martha Rosler, who did a garage sale in the ICA, and originally in '73 in the art gallery in California. Robert Filliou and George Brecht, who had a shop called La Cédille qui Sourit in Villefranche-sur-Mer, where they were having kind of a shop that was not really useful or not selling useful things. It's sort of trying to play around with the idea of selling or swapping, or how you can get outside this sort of system that's been set up, economy. And because we got interested in Filliou, we then invited Will Holder to do a reading as part of Panorama of a chapter of a book by Filliou. And also Luca Frey did a reading from the book by Bookworks, the so-called Utopia of the Centre de Beaubourg. That's it. I just have one sneaky little secret ad to plug in. We're having a book launch as well next week. Please all come.
Navigating from the computer, but I can't see it there. So I'm gonna have to
We can try to mirror it if you want.
no, I think it's fine. So my name's Robert. I work in a studio called Europa, which, as Zach introduced, there's three of us. We've been working together for the last 2 years, and Zach and Magnus have asked me to talk about a project which happened early on in our kind of working relationship. It's called Work for Work. And it actually kind of existed before our studio existed, because we were still students doing an MA at the RCA, at the Royal College of Art. And so 3 years ago we were given an exhibition space as part of a show called the Work in Progress Show. And we were given this space, and we wanted to use it as something quite an active space, and we wanted to kind of set up a framework effectively, which is what this project is. It's a framework which is kind of an agreement, a series of agreements that we've kind of been playing out with different people, where we will ask someone to do a piece of work for us, and in return then we will do a piece of work for them. So it's a kind of simple labour exchange, a kind of quite direct exchange of skills. And how it started was we had this exhibition space for 7 days, and each day we invited a different person in to come in and do a workshop. So they'd come in, and they were quite free in terms of what they did with us, but we'd ask them to kind of do something educational for us. And it was kind of there for people to other students in the college to interact with, but it was also a public exhibition, so people could come and observe or take part. So the image there is the exhibition space, kind of towards the end of that first week, where lots of the documentation had been going up on the wall about each project that happened each day. So the first exchange that took place, if you look at the left-hand column, it was an exchange with a product designer called Marcus Bergstrom. And he kind of came in and decided that the best thing to do would be to kind of create a working environment that we could then, over the subsequent workshops, kind of have something as a kind of practical means. So it kind of figured we needed a table and a bench and some lights. So in a day we built a whole load of furniture by hand, with kind of hand tools in the space. And then in return, later on, Marcus was involved in an exhibition of where they were kind of, him and a fashion designer, Karin, were creating workwear. So people would come in and kind of work with them on creating a garment. And what they did was they asked us to basically design a simple label which would be added to each of these garments as they were made. So you can see that there. So I'm just going to talk through a few examples, but not the whole lot. So after those kind of series of 7-day workshops, then we kind of continued the project, the kind of working relationship, and we were interested in how, you know, okay, it worked within an exhibition environment, but perhaps, I mean, it's just a very practical means of kind of creating exchanges between people. We had another exhibition space at there's a gallery at the Royal College called the Hockney Gallery, and this gallery, someone had cancelled the exhibition that was going to be taking place there. So we were kind of offered this space again to kind of use to do something with, and we wrote a letter to David Hockney and invited him in to kind of deliver a lecture or kind of create a workshop in the space. That kind of didn't kind of amount. I mean, he kind of, the reaction that we got from David was a kind of delayed one, and it kind of came after the exhibition took place. But nevertheless, he got back to us and he was interested in kind of creating an exchange, but didn't quite interact with kind of the workshop model, which was fine. But our exchange in that case took place on a kind of more dialogue discussion about our work. So he actually came in and talked to us in our exhibition space about our kind of, this is our final exhibition space at the Royal College. And we then went to his show at the Royal Academy and we kind of talked about his work. So, and then leading on from there, the project or the kind of framework started to be used in a different way. This is an observation we made where a product designer, Simon Jones, was creating an exchange with a guy called James, who was an architect, and completely kind of without us kind of having much contact with them, they're kind of people we kind of knew through people. They'd kind of created their own work-for-work voucher. So Simon had made a table for James, and I don't think had been paid back at that point, but they kind of, this voucher was there. So that was kind of a nice thing where the project was kind of had been seen and then kind of had kind of provoked a kind of exchange completely independently of us by other people. And then the project kind of moved on further. This example is Julia Bourne, who's a graphic designer and a teacher at the Rietveld, had kind of ran a workshop with her students where she set them a project which was basically to instigate a work-for-work exchange or labour exchange themselves. So she kind of enjoyed the framework and kind of thought it would be quite useful educational tool which got the students to perhaps escape their kind of normal studio environment where perhaps they kind of can in some situations be isolated in terms of their working environment. So she asked them to go out, find someone to make an exchange of work with and kind of see what would happen. So this is an example where one student, her name, Anna, created a guide for someone who was new to the city of Amsterdam. So she took an old book and an old guide of Amsterdam, kind of scanned it in and then overprinted kind of more contemporary imagery of the city. So there was this kind of dual nature to this guide, created an interesting project. And then in reply, Lisa did a kind of very practical thing of finding an apartment because Anna was having to move apartment at this time. So it became the kind of framework of this project, I think, again, kind of took on another life, which I think has been quite an interesting one because in a way it was quite useful for us. It started as a framework within an educational system and then escaped that, but has also become an interesting educational tool, kind of returning itself to the educational framework. I'll just talk about one more. This is another example to show kind of that it's also an ongoing practice for us. It's, we kind of left college as graduating students and over the past couple of years have obviously worked professionally, earning money for jobs we do, but have a kind of also an exchange of working relationships with different people. This is the workshop of three product designers, Marcus Bergstrom, Simon Jones and Joe Nunn. And they, although they'd had a workshop together for a year, then kind of decided that they would like to start as a kind of under a studio name. And at that point they decided that their studio name should be General Woodwork. So we designed this kind of announcement card, if you like, postcard size, to announce their company. A kind of simple kind of tape measure and kind of saw graphic imagery. Kind of a couple of days labour, which was a kind of useful tool that they could give out and announce their company. Kind of subsequently, as you can read, it's they decided to change the name of their company, which makes this somewhat redundant, this postcard, but they're now called Glass Hill, so maybe we can use this printed matter, overprint it perhaps. The return payment for this project has yet to be realised, but they have designed these stools which were actually for something else, for a different exhibition that we were working with them on. But we liked them so much and we weren't given any of these stools that we've been promised a couple of days work on making stools, so we're hoping to get this kind of material product in return for their labour. I guess also on a note, in terms of how the project relates to us now, it is an ongoing kind of series of exchanges which we kind of continue to do and creates an interesting kind of dialogue between us and people. I think there's a kind of closeness and a close understanding of different people's practices that we get from this exchange. But it's also an interesting kind of model when we kind of look on a small scale inside our studio. Our studio is run on a kind of very balanced economic model because some of us are out of the studio quite often teaching, some of us work on jobs which earn quite a lot of money, some of us work on jobs during a period which might earn very little money. But our economy in the studio is very balanced. We share everything, so there's a kind of understanding that the kind of labour input into the studio can be equated to each other. And I think that allows us to kind of never kind of worry about the kind of different types of projects that we might engage with, whether the value of those projects is a kind of creative value or perhaps a financial value or both. Okay.
Thank you very much, Robert. So what I think what we will do now is to open up to a discussion to the floor. We have a kind of roving microphone. If you have a question, raise your hand and I can bring one to you. And at the same time, as you start to think of questions, Magnus and I can perhaps start with a few points. One thing I was thinking about as the designers were giving these presentations was that many of the projects are united by kind of developing, as Magnus was saying earlier, a space or a platform to initiate kind of practices or new works. And Sarah mentioned something which is of course very important, that this work exists within oftentimes commissioned proposals or commissioned projects, and kind of negotiates for a space within that, often in collaboration with educational or cultural institutions. So perhaps we could, Magnus, would you like to start with?
Yeah, I mean, we set up those a few questions to prepare this, and maybe in many ways people have already started to kind of answer them. But we were interested in asking what kind of circumstances that leads you to establish your own platforms in a way for this kind of work in parallel to the more possibly kind of commercial practice. So that might be the first question. I guess you kind of started to answer that in the end, but maybe you can elaborate that if this is something that comes from a need of doing something that you can't find, for example, in a commercial commission.
I mean, definitely, when it started for us, when we were in a student environment, I talked about the two different environments. In a student environment, I guess at that point we felt that there could be more things happening or kind of instigated or started in this kind of college environment that perhaps the college wasn't giving us. And I guess that kind of can be echoed in the kind of commercial environment, when it can be quite daunting. The price that I might pay for a really well designed crafted stool might be kind of a lot of money, which can be daunting to me. But perhaps it gives me an opportunity to kind of start something that otherwise I wouldn't.
And were there also specific kind of I don't know, were there historical models? Sarah mentioned this project by Martha Rosler and various kind of references that maybe you discovered afterwards, or maybe you could also talk about the relationship of these references to the project. I mean, is that something that you?
Yeah, that would be. Can I get back to my? I'm not very good with computers.
I don't think so. Here?
Yeah.
Here. No? There you are. So that's maybe a question for both of you, if you could.
Yeah. There was one that was kind of interesting. I mean, there's a few actually. The music that kind of jumped in at the beginning was it's a little anecdote which is here, which is it's a chap called Lullaby by Stravinsky, and he was so I mean you can read it, but yeah, he was living in America. There was work being done on his home, and the builder who was doing the work with the carpenter said, actually, I'd rather you wrote me a piece of music in return payment for the kind of work that I'm doing. So that track got written. There's also another model which is this kind of the kind of history of labour exchange, which is kind of loosely kind of crops up in a lot of kind of anarchist principles as well. There's this person called Josiah Warren opened what was called a time store, and this is an example. This image here is an example of an old labour note, which is kind of funny because we discovered this kind of post starting the project, and it actually actually come and he created a small community where people were actually exchanging labour with each other. And then went off and created a kind of had an influence in a certain of different communities in America. One called New Harmony and one another one called Utopia. So there are kind of models in history which have definitely kind of have fed the kind of thinking of this project.
Hello. Hi. Sorry. I just want to ask, what happens when someone offers you something, like a piece of work or a certain exchange of labour, and has it happened to you that you just don't like what they've done? And what do you do? Because it happens to me. I'm like, I don't want that for that. Has it happened? And have you got any examples?
Maybe we should also say that Fraser also had a stall at Bartorama, and he was one of the toughest bartering people at Bartorama, it has to be said.
But no, I think it's it's all very kind of like brilliant, and we all love each other. But ultimately, what happens if someone offers you something, a piece of work, a stall, and you don't want it? Do you go, okay, have you that's great, or do you go no?
You say no.
Really, and you've done that?
Have we done that?
No. I think we would though.
No, but I think that's really, it's a really fair point. Because we had a lot of exchanges at the Barcelona, and I didn't. We didn't agree, and that was kind of. But that's part of any kind of exchange, isn't it?
I think you'd be careful about who you went into a work-for-work exchange with in the first place. What do you think?
Yeah.
And is it the same amount of work? Is it like an hour for an hour?
It should be exactly the same. Something that was interesting with the beginning, when we first started the project, we offered more. We offered we were kind of keen kind of students, and we kind of offered more labour time or we offered 4 days in return, and they were doing like a day's kind of workshop, although we envisaged that they would kind of plan a day. So on that, there's a kind of distortion of the kind of some kind of equality of but yeah, there's definitely an interesting kind of discussion about how the value of someone's work obviously kind of varies completely on their skills. So that's always got to be taken into account.
Can I move the discussion a little bit back to what kind of drives you to create this kind of alternative spaces? And it would be interesting to ask Martin to kind of maybe going also back to the idea of bringing forms of inquiry and to the Swedish context and the background to that, because you kind of argued that there was a lack of understanding of contemporary graphic design at all in Sweden.
I always say that. No, so down, I think. Well, you could argue that Swedish graphic design profession is a very young one, actually. I just looked this up. 15 years ago, there were no real design studios in Sweden. The work was done by advertising agencies, so they snatched our work in a way. And I think if you Google Swedish graphic design, you get like 200 hits, and if you Google Swedish advertising, you get over 18,000 hits. So it's a bit of says something about the climate. And for me and Jonas, we felt that bringing the Forms of Inquiry exhibition to Sweden would quite easily, we thought, make a quite important step towards or like to vitalize the Swedish design debate in a way, in a swap. So And when exactly when at that time the IASPIS design, architecture and design department opened with Magnus as a director, we thought that was the perfect match in a way. So therefore we contacted you, and yeah, and the rest is history. Yeah.
Has there been an effect? Have you noticed anything?
Yeah, we got a bit of attention. Yeah, there was a bit of a debate around it, and lots of articles, I think, in the Swedish press.
And also there were a lot of people coming to the seminar, and not only the kind of people that we expected, like students and or just freelance designers with their own practices, but also a lot of advertising, like art directors that we never thought would take interest in this. So I think there has been an absence in Sweden. No discussions about these things whatsoever. No critical debate. No investigate. So I think there's a hunger, like for exhibitions and books and seminars. Yeah.
But maybe you could also. I mean, we were speaking earlier about this book, and also Magnus, you mentioned in your presentation, you spoke about the book as a kind of discursive space, and I think this book is quite interesting in that it doesn't simply kind of reiterate what happened during this forum. It's not simply a transcript, but it kind of takes the project in a way that it actually couldn't go, a place it couldn't go in the seminar itself. So I guess then the question is, how do you, where do you go with this? I mean, perhaps you could talk about how this relates to, the other kind of projects that you showed, or how platforms and publications relate to your own kind of activity at IASPIS.
Yeah, I think I could start by making a comment to what was said before, because it's kind of interesting that as the IASPIS is not really supposed to be this platform in Sweden. I mean, our mission is mainly to kind of work for creating international kind of exchange and dialogue between practitioners and others. But there is such a kind of there is no other kind of place, so people really kind of look at what we're doing and kind of consider this to be the platform or this kind of discursive space. So that's kind of interesting to see, because there's definitely lacking. I mean, the Swedish climate is kind of lacking from this, and I'm not sure how the situation is here, but it seems like there are so many kind of platforms dealing with these kind of possibly narrow issues without outside the academia, perhaps. But the book, when it comes to being anyway a platform, then I mean it works in many different ways, I think, and I was possibly a bit naive about how it would actually function as a kind of platform for exchange or even networking. And of course, there's quite a lot of people involved in the book, and these are kind of spreading out. So I think there might be something interesting going on there. And I think during this seminar in Stockholm, was interesting because, as Sarah said, it brought people from fields that we didn't actually thought were interested in this, and they have kind of connected to this network of people and this kind of possibly this approach in design as well. So I think in many ways it may work, and then of course we don't have any reactions to the books yet. And that's of course the very important part. I don't know if I answered your question really, but in a way. And then
but it's
of
also
course it's interesting to see now what's going to happen. I mean, after this, and how we could actually take this possibly further, or what the book would actually create by itself. And I mean, we were also, I think, one for in relation to the Swedish scene. It's also interesting that we've done it bilingual. So we actually published a rather kind of extensive read in Swedish as well, which I think is
That's
kind of interesting.
very
And that
important.
was basically, I mean, demands from Martin and Jonas. Although IASPIS usually do these kind of bilingual things, but I think that was such a good idea as well to kind of bring this into to actually make more people read and read more carefully, and feel that they're kind of able to join the discussion.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions from the audience? No? Perhaps we could maybe think also about kind of future projects. I mean, I was also interested if there are projects in this vein that are to be developed in the future, if there are projects that you're working on that kind of engage with this idea of platforms or spaces that you're working on now, or if you also plan to continue these projects. I mean, for instance, Bartarama seemed very kind of matched within the kind of specific circumstances of the exhibition that you designed and the signage for, but is that something that you plan on continuing? And also with Work for Work or with the IASPIS's program, is this, are there more projects that you're already thinking about initiating or continuing the projects that you presented?
I think Bartarama definitely, we would really like to do it again, but not at the Barbican. It was, yeah, I can't think of other projects I'm doing at the moment.
Does it connect to, you mentioned
Yes, I think that, I was going to
the
say,
form of the,
yeah, maybe you were asking about, what was it, historical references, and I think our references were not that much historical, but mostly just seeing around us in the economic climate what was happening, and all these internet platforms that are started to exist, where you do this online swapping, and so maybe that's more where we got inspired, and also from the fact that we are, Anthony and I run this occasional papers publishing company, and so our interest from books kind of brought that in. That's where the link came from, so I think that's where it will continue as well.
I don't have a kind of direct answer to that question, but I guess perhaps kind of talking, because there were kind of, although maybe Bartarama came from a different starting place, it was kind of interesting to kind of look at the two projects side by side in terms of kind of, I guess I'm quite interested in economies, which is kind of really interesting to try and look at these two things where I guess they're experiments which have kind of taken different, have kind of occurred on different levels, where one experiment that is kind of an ongoing work for work, if you like, where the kind of labour is kind of locked in on a kind of direct exchange, and then Bartarama was quite interesting because perhaps a piece of labour then gets kind of embodied in a book, which is kind of an object, which is still I guess it exists as a commodity, but doesn't get abstracted that kind of second stage into money as a kind of intermediary. So you've got these kind of exchange of these objects, which is quite interesting.
I think, what we were really interested in was kind of opening it up as well, and making it that anyone can take part and show up with a book, and we also had no idea if we made it available for anyone to set up a stall as well. If you just came with a bunch of books you could take part with, which maybe is quite different with Work for Work, but which Work for Work could be as well. I don't know how you want to take that.
We talked about kind of banks, I guess, kind of time stores, if you like, where obviously then the relationship doesn't have to be direct, it can then be kind of exchanged on, sort of thing. And that's been kind of an ongoing discussion over the past few years. I guess something that was quite interesting that happened to us at Bartarama was we bought a whole load of one book, and it was kind of interesting because at the beginning we could swap this book with anyone, but then we kind of flooded this microeconomy quite quickly. So suddenly we'd flooded the market with our book, and our book kind of, the kind of exchange value just kind of plummeted. That was kind of really interesting to see that
oversaturate.
They did. And that was kind of interesting how the project played out. I mean, I think that I envisage that's kind of an ongoing interest within the project.
But do you have any plans with word for word to like let it go and have it be used by other people, or is it? It feels like it's almost very much about you and someone else.
It kind of perhaps would be more is more interesting for it not to be. I mean, I think the thing that stopped us is because there are kind of exchange models. eFlux have just started one where there's a kind of international exchange of labour, which I can't really speak in detail about, but that's kind of I guess started a couple of months ago, I think. So that's something to think about. But I guess it's kind of interesting where it can work on in what kind of communities it can work within. Perhaps on an online international community is one space, but also within educational environments is a different type of community. Yes, kind of it's more interesting when it kind of gets removed from us as an individual group.
That's not necessarily. I think it's the different thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are these kind of models of time banks, which of course can be kind of applicable to a wide group of people, but the kind of really specific ways in which you kind of use it is what is so interesting, and like how the transactions actually occur, and how it kind of also breaks the rules occasionally, and it's not the kind of like 3 hours for 3 hours, but it's kind of more complex.
Yeah, those distortions become interesting, or kind of they reveal certain truths, I guess.
I'm not sure I'm going to answer your question, but we're going to hopefully continue to create this kind of space that I think, I mean, maybe I should, it's interesting because, I mean, when we started up kind of embracing design and architecture at the IASPIS, we did that from kind of the same model as been done within the art world for a long time, and I think mostly it seems like people need to kind of move into the art world to be able to find this kind of space. But I was kind of curious then, coming from this cultural organization, what because now you've been giving us examples of like self-initiated projects, or kind of negotiating through commissions and things. Is there other forms that you would like to see around? I mean, Zach's been creating this, I mean, your initiative to create forms of inquiry as an exhibition, to kind of highlight those things and create a space there. But can we see other forms that's other, I mean, other examples maybe in other areas that we can look at? Maybe it's, I mean, mostly for your own practitioners in a way.
I mean, I think a lot of, maybe actually all of the projects kind of were interesting in not only the kind of content of the project, but how they were innovative in the way in which they kind of responded to an initial invitation, perhaps. So whether that be like, the work in progress exhibition, or the invitation to, provide some kind of graphic design, or actually to be on a panel. It seems like it started that way. And then also, for Martin and Jonas to kind of, propose this kind of unsolicited proposal. So this kind of negotiation, I think, is quite interesting. And that's also something that happened at the AA. The way Forms of Inquiry came about was that there was a kind of existing proposal for an exhibition of graphic design that looked at kind of the application of graphic design to architecture, so kind of like writings on buildings. And that was kind of the way that in which I responded to it, and the way in which the contributors responded to it kind of took it in another direction. So it's these kind of distortions and responses are also, I think, very, very important, because of course the invitation doesn't always come kind of carte blanche. Do we have any other questions or comments, perhaps?
Couple of reflections. I think it's working, no?
Yeah.
invited her to do a project, and she came with carte blanche. She came like with no luggage at all, and she asked me to take me on a tour in the building we were in at the time, the art museum. And we ended up actually connecting the different tenants of this building, and also staging a garage sale at the end, and turning the whole choreography of this art museum, of course, upside down, and also triggering the Kunstkapital discussion, and also turning the whole museum into space for multiplication, and that was a very interesting process. And beautiful portrait of society of today, of course, because I asked her, do you really, I went into a lot of trash and garbage places around my neighborhood, and I ran into old computers, and I asked Martha, do you want computers? And of course I want computers. I want a mountain of them, because it's the garbage of our time. Another comment on the alternative economy and work-for-work procedure that I find most interesting. For the moment, we have a resident at the IASPIS residency, a woman from Beirut, who comes to Stockholm for 3 months, and she says, I feel almost like a tourist. I know I'm an artist. I'm supposed to do something here. I'm supposed to do research. So she decided to put an ad in the newspaper, and to actually offer an exchange. So what would you like me to do? And what are the situations within your everyday life that you would like someone else maybe to do? She got a lot of answers. So that's her way of actually getting to know the society she happens to be within, ordinary Norman. Anyhow, back to platform making, and I would like to ask you if you think that this has to do also with collaborative working methods, or actually bringing different skills, different professions together. Because when you create a certain platform for a certain concern, for a certain project, for a certain issue, a certain concern, you bring different professions together. Sometimes you're closing your working process, you're narrowing it, and sometimes you create a platform to open it up for other people, for other professions to come in. So I would like to hear if this is constructive, or if it's actually just taking time, energy, and making you into administrative bureaucrats, because creating a platform is actually hard work. Who documents it, the work that you actually come up with? Who gets the different roles? And who picks the different roles? Because it might change your working tools, it might change your role in the wider process to create a platform for a specific project. Is Europa a platform? Do you choose do you maybe choose work or missions or commissions or whatever that actually fit your collaborative practice?
I think perhaps more that we shape the commission comes in. I don't think we necessarily choose it. Perhaps someone might approach us and then commission us to do something, and then they're making a choice based on the kind of work that they see already. So that's kind of that kind of decision made from their part, and then I guess we're taking it on from there and deciding kind of what's interesting about the person that's come to us. Quite often we're finding something interesting in their practice or their content, and then kind of turning that into a piece of work. I guess that's kind of the traditional way when we're actually kind of finding a solution to a project in a kind of more traditional idea of kind of graphic designer's role. I mean, there's so much in terms of what we do, even if kind of ends up in a kind of more material form, which is the kind of facilitating part of it. It's just kind of we facilitate part of the project and then kind of find the solution for that. Whereas perhaps in starting the framework, it's I mean a lot of the same organizational kind of things go into the kind of role of it, but perhaps there are less in kind of, I don't know.
But isn't it about, I mean, finding space to, and as you explained before, that you kind of created this economy within the studio where you could actually both work on kind of really kind of well-paid commissions, but also do other things. I mean, that to me looks like a platform for creating space for alternative work.
I think maybe for me there's something I am. It's just me in the studio and Chris who works with me. But we're not 4 people, so maybe those kind of projects are in a way an excuse to collaborate or to get outside of sort of the daily structure and put on, yeah, as you say, different roles on, and that then influences again how you design.
I'd like to add, when I spoke to, in the book there's an interview with Dexter Sinister, and I asked them what the relation was between their commercial work and their self-initiated work, and they said that because they are known for their self-initiated work, so the commissioned work is usually, you know, people asking them to curate their own work. Like that's the brief. Like we need something. Can you come up with an idea? So I think that's what that can happen too. That you show that you want to work. Like if you're an illustrator and have your portfolio full of pictures of horses, you will get commissioned to draw horses. So it's kind of, you know, it's similar for I think every designer as well. After a while.
I think we have one question over here and then one more over here.
Well, I'm not really sure what my question is now because it relates to a previous point, but I was just going to say, is this on?
Yeah.
But surely this whole collaboration thing, isn't it just about running a studio? Really? Often it's just about running a studio. You've got 3 people in the studio, you're going to work together. I'm not sure, maybe I'm just a bit simple. I'm not sure if I get the kind of like the academic take on it, but it's just like work comes in, you've got 3 people, you look at it, and then it gets done. You know, and I've always been the kind of, I think the funny thing about what my philosophy is that I've always not wanted to collaborate at all. And then I suddenly, through various sort of things, sort of started doing something with someone else without even like project with Sarah. We haven't gone, oh, let's collaborate. We've just sort of suddenly ended up doing something. I don't even know how. And I think that's what's really good about collaboration when it's not, you don't even talk about it. It just happens. Like maybe the way that this project has turned into something else, the way that, you know, just that's what's great about what we do. It's an observation, not a question.
Really good with Mike, but I think going back to what Cecilia was saying is that I think there's a real desire to create new platform, but there's as well a necessity to create new platform. You don't have, it's like you create an exhibition, you have to write about this exhibition, you have to communicate about this exhibition. You can't just it's like you need to be multi-skilled. Like we expect you to communicate, we expect you to write, we expect you to collaborate, and you to come up with the ideas. It's not just about desire, it's a necessity, I think.
And I think that's maybe also interesting, like in light of the question of isn't it just studio practice? I mean, what the previous point kind of mentioned this idea of facilitating and, you know, of openness and transparency and who is able to be part of this activity and process. So in a sense, I think there are kind of slight differentiations between studio practice, but they do all kind of come out of this very kind of everyday activities, and oftentimes kind of develop in a very kind of organic way. So I guess that's not really an answer, but it's another statement.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah,
Which
we're running
we're running a bit late.
time,
But
we'll have
I was just
more.
thinking that maybe connected to Martin's thoughts about what was kind of missing in Sweden, I would like to ask you maybe how important it is to have platforms to relate to in your work, because I mean collaboration or creating this kind of navigating through commissions to be able to do something else might be one way, but you need possibly something to relate to, some possibly critique, another space that could maybe be a platform for discussion or etc. etc. Is that important, or could you create that among your studio, or do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's super important, and we don't have enough of it in graphic design. It's really dismal if you compare to other disciplines. What's there, I think, and we need much more of it. And I think, like in London, where do you see good graphic design exhibitions? It's very rare, I think. Or who publishes good graphic design books? Maybe one or two places, and even that. And that's in London, where there are loads of graphic designers. I try to find a bit with teaching and publishing or making like the form of the book conference we did, but I think everybody should be doing it, and so we can kind of raise ourselves to a bit of a different level in thinking about the profession and talking about it that we are really not able to do at the moment. I think it's so much nice picture books and funky graphics, or you have like a totally dry thing that has nothing in the middle. Like practitioners aren't used to talking about their work that's more than just showing a finished project.
I think that's that's really important, the kind of open discussion, to have that these platforms for discussion about how to arrive at a finished product and how different models can kind of exist to actually allow you to arrive at that finished product. And there are defaults, and there are kind of traditional ways of kind of running studios, but there are kind of, I think there are lots of variations that is quite good to actually discuss on that.
Yeah, and I think from really basic giving each other advice to more looking at history or design theory.
All right.
Yeah. So let's see if this book could contribute to this.
So perhaps
we could see each other in a year and discuss them.
all right, so perhaps with this talk about open discussion, we can leave the discussion kind of open, perhaps maybe in the bar rather than here. So thank you all for contributing, and thank you very much.